The summer of 1847 brought a relentless drought to the Texas frontier, parching the land until it cracked like old leather. At the edge of Comanche territory, Martha Rawlins stood on the porch of her isolated homestead, scanning the horizon with eyes accustomed to spotting trouble. 3 years a widow, she had learned to survive on her own terms, tending her small farm with calloused hands and an iron will that the local settlers had come to respect, if not understand. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Martha refilled her water bucket from the nearly depleted well. The faint sound of movement caught her attention, something dragging itself through the tall grass beyond her property line. Her hand instinctively moved to the rifle, always kept within reach. What emerged from the grass was not the coyote or wounded deer she expected, but a boy, no more than 12 years old, his copper skin marking him unmistakably as Comanche, blood soaked through a crude bandage on his thigh, and his face contorted with pain and fear when he spotted her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Martha froze, her mind racing. Relations between settlers and the Comanche remained tense even after years of uneasy treaties. Most of her neighbors would have either shot the boy or left him to die, claiming one less savage to worry about. The thought darkened her expression as she watched the boy try to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood on the sun-baked earth. "Wait!" she called out, setting down her rifle and raising her empty hands. "I won't hurt you." The boy collapsed either, from exhaustion or resignation. Martha approached cautiously, noting the arrow wound in his thigh, not a Comanche arrow, Kiowa perhaps. The tribes had been skirmishing for months over hunting territories. "My name is Martha," she said, knowing he probably wouldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her intentions. "I can help you." His dark eyes, glazed with pain, watched her every movement with the wariness of a wounded wolf. When she reached toward him, he tried to scramble away, but his strength had abandoned him. "You'll die out here," Martha said firmly, then pointed to his wound and mimicked cleaning and bandaging it. After a moment of tense silence, the boy gave an almost imperceptible nod. Martha carried him to the house, feeling how alarmingly light he was in her arms. Inside, she laid him on her kitchen table and gathered supplies: clean water, strips of fabric, a knife, and her precious bottle of whiskey kept for medicinal purposes. The arrow had gone clean through, which was a blessing. The wound would be easier to clean. As Martha worked, the boy remained stoically silent despite what must have been excruciating pain when she poured whiskey over the wound. "You're brave," she told him, admiration in her voice. "My son would have howled the house down." The mention of her son caused her hands to still momentarily, memories threatening to overwhelm her. 3 winters ago, influenza had taken both her husband and their only child within a week of each other. Some days, the grief still felt fresh enough to steal her breath. The boy watched her face with unexpected perception. He seemed to understand that she had lost someone, though they shared no common language. After bandaging his wound, Martha helped him to the small second bedroom, her son's room, untouched since his passing. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the wooden toys still scattered on the floor. He looked at her questioningly. "My son, James," Martha explained, touching her heart. "He's gone now." The boy touched his own heart, then gestured to the sky, with a solemn expression that transcended their language barrier. Martha felt tears prick at her eyes and nodded. As night fell, Martha kept vigil by the boy's bedside, checking his wound and watching for fever. He had finally surrendered to exhaustion, his breathing steady despite occasional winces of pain. In sleep, the hard lines of wariness disappeared from his face, revealing just how young he truly was. Martha knew harboring a Comanche child would be considered treason by many of her neighbors. The Comanche were feared across the frontier, their raids legendary for their brutality. But looking at the sleeping child, Martha could only see a boy in need, not unlike her own son had been. Dawn broke with the boy burning with fever, his skin hot to the touch. Martha worked tirelessly, applying cool compresses and forcing him to drink water with herbs steeped in it. By midday, his fever had broken, and he managed to swallow some broth. That evening, Martha sat beside him, attempting to communicate. She pointed to herself. "Martha." The boy hesitated, then touched his chest. "Tabe." It was a start. Martha smiled, and for the first time, Tabe's lips curled slightly in return. As the second day dawned, Martha changed Tabe's bandages. Pleased to see the wound showed no signs of festering. He was recovering his strength remarkably quickly, already able to sit up and take a few steps with her support. Martha worked in her garden that afternoon, harvesting what vegetables had survived. The drought. Taabe watched from the porch, occasionally pointing at plants and speaking words in his language that Martha repeated, their shared vocabulary growing with each exchange. The peaceful rhythm of the day shattered at dusk when Taabe suddenly stiffened. His head turning toward the western horizon, Martha followed his gaze, but saw nothing. "What is it?" she asked, instinctively reaching for her rifle. Taabe's expression transformed from wariness to what appeared to be relief. He limped to the edge of the porch and pointed insistently westward, speaking rapidly in his language. It was then that Martha felt it, a vibration in the ground beneath her feet, like distant thunder. But the sky was clear, painted in the deepening oranges and purples of sunset. Riders coming, she realized aloud, her heart beginning to pound. Many of them. Taabe nodded vigorously, then spoke a word that needed no translation. "Father." Martha's blood ran cold as the first mounted warriors appeared on the ridge, their silhouettes stark against the setting sun. There were dozens of them, perhaps the entire tribe, armed and painted for war. At their head rode a tall figure adorned with the full regalia of a Comanche war chief. Taabe called out, his voice carrying across the open ground between the house and the ridge. The war party halted, and for a breathless moment Martha stood frozen, one hand on her rifle, the other on Taabe's shoulder. The war chief raised his lance, pointing it directly at Martha's homestead. Then, as one, the entire war party began to descend the ridge toward her isolated farm. Martha's fingers tightened around her rifle as the Comanche warriors descended the ridge, dust rising behind them like smoke signals against the darkening sky. The thunder of hooves grew louder, each beat matching her racing heart. Beside her, Taabe called out again, his voice carrying surprisingly strong for a boy who'd been at death's door just yesterday. "Stay behind me," Martha whispered, moving to position herself between the boy and the approaching warriors. But Taabe limped forward instead, waving his arms and shouting words she couldn't understand. The war party slowed as they neared the farmhouse, spreading out in a wide semicircle that trapped Martha between her home and 30 mounted warriors, each face painted with red and black streaks that transformed them into something otherworldly in the fading light. The chief at their center rode forward alone, his obsidian eyes finding Martha's. He wore a magnificent headdress of eagle feathers that trailed down his back, and around his neck hung an array of talismans, bear claws, silver medallions, and what Martha recognized with a shudder as human finger bones. His stallion, taller than the other horses, pawed at the ground impatiently. "Pia!" Taabe called, smiling for the first time since Martha had found him. The chief's gaze shifted to the boy, his expression unreadable beneath the war paint. He spoke a single word, and Taabe launched into rapid speech, gesturing repeatedly toward Martha. When the boy finished, silence fell across the yard. The warriors remained motionless, spears and rifles held at ready. Martha knew her own weapon would be useless against such numbers, yet she couldn't bring herself to set it aside. The chief dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasins landing silently on the hard-packed earth. He approached, towering over both Martha and the boy, his shadow stretching long in the dying sunlight. "My son says you saved him," the chief said in perfect, if accented English, making Martha start with surprise. "Says you cleaned his wound with fire water and gave him your dead son's bed." Martha swallowed hard. "I did what anyone would have done." The hint of a smile touched the chief's stern mouth. "No, what anyone would have done is kill him or leave him to die. Comanche boy on white woman's land, most would see only enemy." He studied her with unexpected intensity. "I am Eagle Knife. This boy, Tabe, is my youngest son. He was separated from hunting party when Kiowa attacked. We thought him dead." Martha lowered her rifle slightly. "I'm Martha Rawlins." Eagle Knife nodded once, then turned and barked orders to his warriors. Instantly, several dismounted and began unpacking bundles from their horses. Others fanned out around the property. "What are they doing?" Martha asked, alarm rising in her throat. "Making camp," Eagle Knife replied simply. "Night comes, we stay here. But you fear 30 Comanche warriors outside your door." It wasn't a question. "Fear is wise, but tonight you need not fear us." One of the warriors approached, leading a magnificent buckskin mare. In his hands he carried a small deerskin package, which he presented to the chief with ceremony. Eagle Knife took the package and held it out to Martha. "For the woman who returned my son." With trembling hands, Martha unwrapped the soft leather to reveal a necklace of polished turquoise and silver, finer than anything she'd ever owned, even before frontier life had stripped her existence to bare necessities. "I can't accept," she began. "You can. You will." Eagle Knife's tone left no room for refusal. "Comanche, do not forget blood debt." As darkness settled completely, fires bloomed around her property. Warriors began preparing food, the smell of roasting meat making Martha's mouth water, despite her apprehension. She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast, too busy tending to Tabe. Eagle Knife seated himself on Martha's porch steps as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Tabe limped over to join him, speaking excitedly. Martha stood awkwardly by her door, unsure of her role now that her patient had been reunited with his people. "Join us," Eagle Knife said, gesturing to the space beside him. "My son wishes to show me how you bound his wound." Martha hesitated, then sat down, hyper-aware of the dozens of Comanche warriors moving efficiently around her property. "Will you take him tonight?" Eagle Knife shook his head. "Wound is fresh. Moving him brings danger of bleeding again. 2 more days, then he rides with me." 2 more days, Martha echoed, relief and worry battling within her. Relief that Tabe would have proper time to heal. Worry about how her neighbors would react if they discovered a Comanche war party camped on her land. "You live alone," Eagle Knife observed. "No husband, no family." Martha looked away. "Not anymore. Fever took them 3 winters ago." Eagle Knife was silent for a long moment. Then, "My first wife, Tabe's mother, also taken by spotted fever. 4 summers passed." The unexpected sharing of grief created a fragile bridge between them. Martha found herself studying his profile in the firelight, the proud nose, the deep lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting against sun and wind for decades. "Why do you stay here alone?" he asked. "This is dangerous country for women with no protection." "It's my home," Martha answered simply. "Everything I have left of them is here." Eagle Knife nodded, as if this made perfect sense to him. "Land holds memories. Bones of ancestors make it sacred." A warrior approached with wooden bowls of stew. Eagle Knife took one and offered it to Martha. The rich aroma of venison and wild onions rose with the steam. "Eat," he said. "Story of my son's rescue will be told around Comanche fires for many moons, the white woman with heart of warrior and hands of healer." Martha accepted the bowl, suddenly, ravenous. As she ate, she watched the efficient movement of the war party around her property. These were the dreaded Comanche, the terror of the frontier, whose mere mention caused settlers to bar their doors and load their rifles. Yet here they sat, sharing food and speaking of family bonds as if they were any other neighbors. "You people fear mine," Eagle Knife said, reading her thoughts. "They are right to fear. We are warriors, but they do not understand us." "And you understand them?" Martha asked. Eagle Knife's expression hardened. "I understand white man comes, always, wanting more land, more buffalo, more everything. Treaties made, treaties broken, understanding is not needed for truth." Martha couldn't argue with this assessment. She had seen firsthand how promises made to the native tribes were disregarded the moment they became inconvenient. As the night deepened, warriors began taking watch positions around the perimeter of her property. Others bedded down near the fires, while some tended to the horses. The organization and discipline impressed Martha. This was not a random band, but a highly structured community. Eagle Knife remained on her porch, seemingly content to watch the stars emerge. Tabe had fallen asleep, leaning against his father's shoulder, the boy's face peaceful for the first time since Martha had found him. "You should rest," Eagle Knife told her. "No harm will come to you this night." Martha knew she should feel terrified. A lone woman surrounded by Comanche warriors. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of security. Whatever else these people might be, they honored their debts and protected their own. For tonight, at least, she had been granted a place within that circle of protection. "What happens in the morning?" she asked. Eagle Knife's gaze remained on the stars. "That depends on what sun brings. But remember this, Martha Rawlins, you have earned something few of your kind ever receive, the respect of the Comanche." As Martha finally retreated inside to her bed, the sounds of the encampment surrounded her. Low voices speaking in a language she didn't understand, the occasional nickering of horses, the crackle of fires. Strangely comforting sounds that reminded her she was no longer alone on this isolated homestead. Sleep claimed her more easily than it had in years. Cavalry must see obvious trail, Eagle Knife instructed as they worked in the last light of day. We'll follow into canyon at dawn, thinking they catch us sleeping. Martha helped position the pouches of medicine smoke at strategic points along the canyon floor and up its walls. The warriors moved with ghost-like stealth, leaving no footprints to warn of the ambush being laid. As darkness fell completely, they retreated to a small cave above the canyon entrance. A single warrior was sent to ensure the cavalry took the bait, to let himself be glimpsed just enough to draw them in. In the close confines of the cave, Martha felt Eagle Knife's presence keenly. He sat cross-legged at the entrance, watchful and alert, despite the exhaustion they all felt after 3 days of hard riding. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked quietly, joining him at the cave mouth. "What if someone gets hurt?" Eagle Knife's profile was stark against the star-speckled sky. "Always risk in war, but good plan creates least risk." "Is this war?" Martha wrapped her arms around her knees. "It feels more like survival. For Comanche, they are same thing now." His voice carried the weight of generations of conflict. Once, our territory stretched far as eyes could see, now smaller each season. White settlements, forts, railroads, all taking pieces of Comanche land. Martha had never considered the frontier from this perspective. To settlers, the land was empty, waiting to be claimed and improved. To the Comanche, it was home, being systematically dismantled. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. Eagle Knife turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. "For what? You did not take our land." "No, but I benefited from those who did." It was a painful truth, one she'd never confronted until this moment. A long silence stretched between them, filled only with the soft night sounds of the prairie. Finally, Eagle Knife spoke again. "Why did you save my son?" "Truth." His eyes, reflecting starlight, seemed to look directly into her soul. Martha considered how to answer. At first, because he was a child in pain, any decent person would have helped. She paused, digging deeper. But later, because in helping him, I found purpose again. After losing my family, I'd been surviving, not living. Taabe reminded me that I still had something to give. Eagle Knife nodded slowly, as if her answer confirmed something he'd suspected. "And why did you choose to come with us? Could have stayed, rebuilt, after settlers cooled their anger." The question struck at the heart of her transformation. "Because I realized I'd been clinging to ghosts," Martha admitted. "My homestead wasn't a home anymore. It was a memorial to what I'd lost." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "I chose to follow life instead of guarding death." "Wise choice," Eagle Knife said softly. "Many never find such wisdom." A tension Martha hadn't fully acknowledged suddenly crackled between them, not the wariness of cultural differences, but something more elemental. She became acutely aware of his proximity, the breadth of his shoulders, the quiet strength he radiated. The moment shattered as a warrior returned to report that the cavalry had indeed followed the false trail and made camp just 2 miles from the canyon entrance. They would likely approach at first light, hoping to catch the Comanche band unawares. Eagle Knife rose, addressing the warriors in their language. Martha caught enough words to understand. They would rest in shifts, maintaining vigilance throughout the night. The trap was set. As Martha found a spot to unroll her blanket, exhaustion finally claiming her, she realized that tomorrow would be the point of no return. If they succeeded in turning away the cavalry, she would officially become an enemy of the United States government, a traitor to her race in the eyes of white society. Yet as sleep claimed her, the fear she expected to feel never materialized. Instead, a surprising sense of rightness settled over her. For the first time since fever had taken her family, Martha felt she was exactly where she belonged. Dawn broke with the hushed tension of approaching conflict. Martha woke to the whispered strategy session among the warriors. Their plan was simple but required precise timing. "You stay here," Eagle Knife told her as the others moved into position. "Too dangerous below." Martha shook her head. "I made the medicine smoke with your mother. I know how to use it." She met his gaze steadily. "I didn't come this far to hide in a cave." A hint of admiration flickered in his eyes. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Stay close. Do exactly as I say." They took positions along the canyon rim, hidden among rocks and sparse vegetation. The rising sun cast long shadows across the landscape as they waited in breathless silence for the cavalry to appear. The distant sound of hoofbeats grew steadily louder. Martha peered carefully over the edge to see Captain Mercer leading a column of at least 30 soldiers into the mouth of the canyon, their blue uniforms stark against the red-tinged stone walls. Eagle Knife caught her eye and nodded once, the signal they'd agreed upon. Martha struck a flint, igniting the fuse of her first medicine pouch. She tossed it precisely as the old woman had taught her, watching it fall directly into the path of the lead horses. The effect was instantaneous. The pouch erupted in blinding white light and billowing smoke that rapidly filled the narrow canyon. Horses reared and soldiers shouted in confusion as more pouches were ignited and thrown from various positions along the rim. Through the chaos, Martha glimpsed Captain Mercer trying to maintain order, his voice carrying above the din as he commanded his men to hold formation. But the smoke was having its intended effect. Horses panicked, riders struggled for control, and the ordered column dissolved into disarray. Eagle Knife signaled the warriors to move to the second phase. They began calling out in Comanche, their voices echoing off the canyon walls to create the illusion of a much larger force surrounding the cavalry. Martha added her voice to the chorus, remembering the phrases Eagle Knife had taught her. In the swirling smoke below, the soldiers' confusion was turning to fear as they found themselves effectively blind and seemingly surrounded. Captain Mercer finally shouted the order to retreat. The cavalry column reversed course in near panic, horses and men stumbling over each other in their haste to escape the canyon. As the sounds of their retreat faded, Martha felt a surge of elation, unlike anything she'd experienced before. They had turned away armed cavalry without firing a single shot or spilling a drop of blood. Eagle Knife appeared beside her, his usually stoic expression transformed by a rare smile. "You have warrior's heart," he said, genuine admiration in his voice, "and medicine woman's hands." Before Martha could respond, he reached out and carefully wiped a smudge of ash from her cheek, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "We ride now," he said, the moment passing as quickly as it had come. "Join others before bluecoats regroup." As they descended to retrieve their horses, Martha caught sight of something glinting in the dissipating smoke. A soldier's insignia pin lay abandoned on the canyon floor, dropped in the chaos of retreat. She picked it up, running her thumb over the embossed U.S. Army emblem. It represented everything she had once considered protection, civilization, order. Now, it symbolized a threat to her newfound family. Martha weighed the pin in her palm for a moment, then deliberately placed it on a rock at the canyon entrance, a small marker of the life she had left behind. With one fluid motion, she mounted her pinto mare and turned westward, riding beside Eagle Knife toward the people who had become her own. The rising sun warmed her back as the distance between her past and future grew with each hoofbeat. 6 moons had passed since Martha Rawlins disappeared from the Texas frontier. Stories circulated among settlers. She'd been killed by Comanche raiders, run off by townsfolk, or simply abandoned her homestead after grief finally consumed her. The truth remained unknown to those who had once called her neighbor. and the small wooden crosses beneath the oak tree stood as the only testament that she had ever existed at all. In the shadow of the Wichita Mountains, where few white men dared venture, a different story unfolded. The autumn winds carried the first breath of winter as the Comanche prepared their winter camp, a hidden valley sheltered from the harshest weather and prying eyes. Martha, now known only as Peter Nocona among the people, knelt beside a young woman in labor, her skilled hands guiding a new life into the world. Around her, other women of the band murmured encouragement, passing herbs and clean hides as needed. "Push now," Martha instructed in fluent Comanche, her accent barely noticeable after months of daily practice. "Your son is eager to join us." The birthing mother bore down with a final determined effort, and moments later, a healthy cry filled the teepee. Martha efficiently tied and cut the cord, then placed the squirming infant on his mother's chest. "Strong lungs," she observed with a smile. "He will be a great singer of war songs." The new mother beamed with exhaustion and pride, cradling her firstborn, while the other women celebrated the successful birth. Martha washed her hands in a basin of water infused with sage, reflecting on how natural this all felt now, being trusted to bring Comanche children into the world, speaking their language, living according to their rhythms. Outside, the evening fires were being lit as hunters returned with fresh game. Martha emerged from the birthing tipi to find Taabe waiting anxiously, his leg now fully healed, without even a limp to remember his wound by. "Is Yellow Flower's baby here?" he asked eagerly. Martha nodded. "A healthy boy. You can visit tomorrow, after they've rested." Taabe grinned, falling into step beside her as they walked through camp. At 12, he was shooting up like a sapling, all lanky limbs and boundless energy. He had appointed himself Martha's permanent guide and translator in the early days, though she rarely needed his help anymore. "Father returns tonight," Taabe informed her, his expression brightening further. The hunting party found many buffalo. Martha felt a familiar warmth at the mention of Eagle Knife. Their relationship had evolved gradually from mutual respect to something deeper, though neither had put it into words. The people had accepted her presence without question after the medicine smoke incident, especially once Eagle Knife's mother took Martha as her apprentice in healing arts. "We should prepare for the feast then," Martha replied, quickening her pace toward her own teepee. Her dwelling stood slightly apart from the others, not in exclusion, but in deference to her still developing understanding of Comanche customs. Inside, the space reflected her dual heritage. A traditional buffalo hide bed lay beside baskets of dried herbs and medicines. Her family Bible sat alongside Comanche sacred objects. The turquoise necklace Eagle Knife had given her that first. Night now had companions, beaded bracelets, a carved bone comb, an eagle feather earned when she had helped heal a warrior grievously wounded in a hunting accident. Martha changed from her birthing clothes into a dress Nahimana had made for her. Softened deer hide decorated with intricate beadwork, more practical and comfortable than the cotton dresses she'd once worn. She had learned to move differently in this clothing, to carry herself with the straight-backed confidence of Comanche women. As she prepared to join the gathering, a commotion at the camp's edge drew everyone's attention. The returning hunters had arrived, but their usual celebratory whoops were absent. Instead, a tense silence followed them into the encampment. Martha hurried toward the center clearing where Eagle Knife dismounted, his face grave. Two warriors carried a third between them, a young man Martha recognized as Stone Crow, his leg wrapped in a hasty bandage soaked with blood. "What happened?" she asked, immediately assessing the injury with a healer's eye. "White hunters," Eagle Knife replied tersely. "Shot him from hiding, then ran." Martha helped carry Stone Crow to the medicine teepee, her mind already cataloging the herbs and treatments he would need. The wound was serious but clean. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. As she worked, applying poultices and chanting the healing songs Eagle Knife's mother had taught her, Martha felt the weight of stares from the gathered band members. This was not the first violence they had encountered since she joined them, but it struck closer to home than previous incidents. Later, with Stone Crow resting comfortably, Martha found Eagle Knife sitting alone by the council fire, his expression distant as he stared into the flames. "He will heal," she said, settling beside him. "No infection yet." Eagle Knife nodded, though his tension remained. "White hunters grow bolder, coming deeper into our territory each moon." Martha knew what remained, unspoken, that her presence might be viewed by some as opening the door to further white encroachment. Though no one had said this directly, she had felt occasional sidelong glances when news of settlers venturing closer reached the band. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. Eagle Knife's jaw tightened. "Council meets tonight. Some warriors want to attack settlers' camps, push them back east. Others say we should move further west, find new hunting grounds. And you?" His dark eyes reflected the dancing flames as he turned to her. "I think of Taabe, of children not yet born. What world will they inherit if we keep fighting? What world if we keep running?" The question hung between them, weighted with centuries of conflict that had preceded them and would likely outlast them. Martha had no answer, only a growing certainty that her fate was now inextricably bound with these people. "Whatever is decided," she said finally, "I stand with you." Eagle Knife's hand found hers, strong fingers interlacing with her own. "I know." The simple acknowledgement carried depths of meaning beyond words. The council gathered as night fully claimed the sky, with tribal elders, prominent warriors, and medicine people forming a circle around the central fire. Though women rarely spoke, in formal council, Martha had been invited to attend, not as Peta Nokona the healer, but as one who understood the white world they increasingly confronted. Fierce debate raged for hours, with younger warriors arguing passionately for retaliation. While elders counseled caution and strategic withdrawal, Martha listened silently, understanding more than just the words. She recognized the fear beneath the anger, the desperate desire to protect a way of life under threat from all sides. When Eagle Knife finally called upon her to speak, Martha arose with a clarity that surprised even herself. "I have lived in both worlds," she began, her Comanche words flowing more naturally than English now would have. "The settlers fear what they do not understand, and they hunger for land because they believe it can be owned like a horse or a rifle." She paused, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. "They will not stop coming, not because they hate the people, but because they cannot imagine another way to live except by conquering the earth beneath their feet." Murmurs rose around the circle, but Martha continued, her voice strengthening. "Fighting them brings temporary victory, but eventual destruction. Running delays the inevitable. There is a third path, one that requires more courage than either fighting or fleeing." "What path is this?" an elder asked skeptically. "Adaptation," Martha replied. "Not surrender, not compromise of what makes the people who they are, but learning the white man's ways enough to use them when needed, while holding fast to Comanche heart." She touched the medicine pouch at her belt, a symbol of how she had integrated her frontier knowledge of herbs with Comanche spiritual practices to create healing more powerful than either tradition alone could provide. "I have become Peta Nokona because I walk between worlds," she continued. "Perhaps the people's strength lies not in choosing one world over another, but in learning to walk between them as well." A heavy silence followed her words. Some nodded thoughtfully while others frowned, the very notion challenging centuries of tradition. "She speaks wisdom," Eagle Knife's mother finally declared, her ancient voice carrying surprising strength. Old ways must bend or break. The Comanche can be like the river, changing course when needed, yet always remaining true to its nature, the Fido. Council continued late into the night, with no final decision reached. It would take many such discussions, Martha knew, to chart a path forward. But seeds had been planted, new possibilities introduced where before there had seemed only two dire choices. As the council dispersed, Eagle Knife walked with Martha back toward her teepee, the chill night air drawing them naturally closer together. Your word surprised many, he observed. Old Thunderhorse said a woman who speaks so boldly must have swallowed a warrior's heart, swallowed a warrior's heart, swallowed. Martha smiled slightly. And what did you say to that? That you have always had your own heart, stronger than any warrior's. Eagle Knife stopped, turning to face her fully in the starlight. It is why Taabe lives, why our people respect you, why I... He paused, seeming to search for words that his language might not contain. Martha reached up, her palm resting against his cheek in a gesture that crossed all cultural boundaries. I know, she said simply. For a moment they stood suspended between worlds, neither fully of her past nor entirely of his tradition, but creating something new in the space between. When Eagle Knife finally bent to press his forehead against hers, the gesture felt more binding than any ritual either culture could have prescribed. Tomorrow I ride to parley with white hunters, he said quietly. Show them Comanche are not just warriors, but also diplomats when needed. Fear fluttered in Martha's chest. She knew too well the dangers such a meeting posed. Let me come with you. I can translate, help them understand. Eagle Knife considered this, then nodded slowly. Together then, between worlds, Dawn found them preparing for the diplomatic mission, selecting warriors known for level heads rather than quick tempers. To accompany them, Martha braided her hair in the Comanche style, but wore a cotton blouse beneath her hide dress, a visual representation of her dual identity that might help bridge understanding. As they mounted their horses, Taabe rushed forward, his young face determined. I'm coming too, he declared. I know white words from Martha. I can help. Eagle Knife began to refuse, but Martha touched his arm. He has a right to help shape his future, she said quietly. And his presence reminds them, this is about children on both sides. After a moment's consideration, Eagle Knife nodded. Taabe beamed as he scrambled onto his pony, positioning himself proudly between his father and Martha as they rode out of camp. The journey to the meeting place, a neutral clearing beside a gentle stream, took much of the morning. As they approached, Martha spotted the white delegation already waiting. 3 hunters, a cavalry officer, and surprisingly, Captain Mercer himself, now wearing a major's insignia. Martha felt a momentary surge of apprehension. Would he recognize her? What might that mean for this precarious peace attempt? As their parties drew closer, she saw the exact moment recognition dawned in Mercer's eyes. Shock, disbelief, and something like wonder crossing his features as he beheld the woman who had chosen to disappear into what he considered wilderness. Eagle Knife sensed the change immediately. He knows you. Yes, Martha replied, straightening her spine, but that may work in our favor. He will understand that I chose this life, that there can be bridges between our worlds. She nudged her mare forward alongside Eagle Knife, head held high. No longer the uncertain widow who had once feared her neighbor's judgment, but a woman who had found her place in an unexpected destiny. Major Mercer, she greeted him in English, her tongue feeling strangely awkward around the forgotten sounds. I believe we have matters to discuss that concern both your people and mine. The Major's composure returned quickly, though his eyes remained fixed on her with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Rawlins, reports of your death were evidently premature. "Martha Rawlins died the night I rode west," she replied evenly. "I am Peter Nokona now, and I stand with the Comanche not as captive, but by choice." A murmur passed through the white delegation, but Mercer raised his hand for silence. After a measuring look that took in her confident posture, the boy at her side, and the clear respect with which the Comanche treated her, he gave a single crisp nod. "Then perhaps you are uniquely positioned to help us avoid unnecessary bloodshed," he acknowledged. "Shall we begin?" As the unlikely peace council commenced, Martha translated not just words but intentions, cultural contexts, unspoken concerns. She helped the hunters understand Comanche territorial practices while explaining American legal concepts to Eagle Knife and his warriors. No grand treaty emerged from that first meeting, but something more valuable was established: recognition that dialogue was possible, that mutual destruction was not inevitable. They agreed to meet again after the winter to establish hunting boundaries that might allow coexistence, however uneasy. When they parted ways, Major Mercer approached Martha. Privately, "You realize you could come back," he said, his voice low. "Full pardon, your property restored. These people—" He gestured to Eagle Knife and Tabé, waiting patiently nearby. "They aren't your blood." Martha looked toward the man and boy who had become her family in all the ways that mattered. The sun caught the turquoise at her throat, its blue as clear as her conviction. "Blood isn't what makes a family, Major," she replied. "Nor does land make a home. I found both where I least expected them." Her smile held no regret, only certainty. "I am exactly where I belong." As they rode back toward the winter camp, Tabé chatted excitedly about the meeting, while Eagle Knife moved his horse alongside Martha's. "What did White Chief say to you?" he asked. "That I could return to my old life," she answered honestly. Eagle Knife's expression revealed nothing, but Martha had learned to read the subtle tensions in his shoulders, the minute changes in his breathing. "And what did you tell him?" he asked after a moment's silence. Martha reached across the space between their horses to take his hand, the gesture answering his question more clearly than words could have. Eagle Knife's fingers tightened around hers, the connection a promise more binding than any spoken vow. As they crested the final ridge before home, Martha gazed out at the Comanche winter camp nestled in its protected valley. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children played between teepees, women worked hides and wove baskets. Not the life she had been born to, not the future she had once imagined, but unquestionably where her heart had found its true home. She had crossed between worlds and discovered that borders were more permeable than anyone had believed possible. In saving a wounded Comanche boy, Martha Rawlins had saved herself as well, finding not just survival, but genuine belonging in the most unexpected of places. Perhaps, she thought, as they rode down into the welcoming embrace of the camp, her journey might someday help others cross those same boundaries, not to erase differences, but to weave them into something stronger than either world could create alone. Taabe raced ahead, eager to tell the waiting tribe about their diplomatic success. Eagle Knife slowed his horse to match Martha's pace, their shoulders nearly touching as they rode side by side toward the future they would build together. A future that honored the past while refusing to be limited by it. "Home," he said simply, the word carrying layers of meaning in his native tongue. "Home," Martha agreed, the English word transformed by the Comanche heart with which she now spoke it. The winter sun cast their shadows long across the valley floor, two silhouettes merging into one as they returned to the people who had become their shared destiny. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.